Whether you cook professionally or just at home, I'm sure many of you can relate to this. You've made something you're really excited about eating. Maybe it's just for you, maybe it's for a party. And then something goes wrong. It could be dropping that freshly made sandwich on the floor, or realizing that you added salt instead of sugar to that dessert you made. One time, I made a pot of my family's special baked beans for an event, and my dad left them on the counter overnight, and they had to be thrown out. Any fans of The Office listening? If so, you probably remember Kevin Malone and his pot of chili. He was all excited to bring in a pot of chili he'd made to share with his coworkers. And after schlepping it up the stairs, tragically, he spilled the entire pot on the office carpet. Well, today, my guest is none other than Brian Baumgartner, the actor who brought Kevin to life on the TV show The Office. Brian's portrayal of Kevin provided countless laughs, many unforgettable memories, and, of course, the iconic chili scene. If you've ever wondered about the logistics of that scene, or would just love some behind-the-scenes details from an office insider, this episode's for you. This is Chris Spear, and you're listening to Chefs Without Restaurants, the show where I usually speak with culinary entrepreneurs and people working in the food and beverage industry outside of a traditional restaurant setting. I have 31 years of working in kitchens, but not restaurants, and operate a personal chef service throwing dinner parties in the Washington, D.C. area. Again, I am thrilled to have Brian on the show today. The Office is one of my all-time favorite TV shows, and I'm sure many of you feel the same way. There's so much more to Brian than his on-screen persona. He's an author, a cooking enthusiast, and someone who transformed a 30-second cold open on a TV show into a culinary journey. You might not know this, but in 2022, Brian released the Seriously Good Chili Cookbook, which has 177 recipes in it. Well, now Brian's back with the Seriously Good Barbecue Cookbook, which comes out on June 11th, and it's packed with over 100 recipes. And I'm going to go ahead and drop my call to action a little early here. If you share this episode on social media, I will randomly select one person to win a copy of either Seriously Good Chili or Seriously Good Barbecue. It's your choice. All you have to do is share the episode on social media. Instagram, Facebook, X, Threads, YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, wherever you are these days. Just make sure you screenshot it and send it to me. The easiest way for me to see it is actually if you tag Chefs Without Restaurants on your post. That's my handle on most platforms. And if you don't tag me publicly or can't find me, you can message me or DM it to me on any of those platforms, or send me a screenshot in an email to chefswithoutrestaurants@gmail.com. And I usually share promo videos from the episode on Instagram. If you just want to share that to your Instagram story, that works too. So on today's show, there's a decent amount of talk about The Office, and we definitely talk about the cookbooks, Brian's adventures judging a chili cook-off, and what his top sides to eat with barbecue are. My only regret is that I was unable to work a "That's What She Said" into the episode. So if you like The Office, chili, and or barbecue, I think you're going to enjoy this episode. As always, thanks so much for listening, and have a great week. Hey, Brian, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today. You're someone who's on one of my favorite TV shows of all time, and probably one of the best ensemble comedy shows, I think, ever. I'm sure you would agree. I think most of the world agrees that.
Ever would?
I mean, come on. You're on the Office, looking at the people who've come off of that show. It's just, when you guys were doing that, did you have any idea how special that show was or was going to be? Or did you think you were going to get canceled like after the first 6 episodes?
No, we thought we were going to be canceled after 6 episodes, but I knew that the people that were working on the show, how the show was constructed, the types of things that we were talking about, meaning social issues, issues of race and gender and sexual harassment, politics surrounding the office place. I knew that it was cool and different. I just figured it was too different and people were not going to give it a chance to stay on. So that's the 2-part answer to your question. Yeah, we all sort of thought we were done after 6 and then again after just 12. But from the beginning, it wasn't because I didn't think that what we were doing was valuable. It was because I just thought it was going to be too different, too bold at that time to survive on network television.
Well, and you also have a subset of people who were fans of the original. I had seen the original before that.
Right.
And I remember watching the first episode, which was almost like a shot for shot remake, right? And I remember watching, I'm like, oh my God, they're doing like the stapler and the Jello. Are we just going to have like 12 episodes of them doing the same stuff that was done? But I mean, like very quickly, you're like, oh no, this is a same but different show. It's great. I watched the whole series all the way through, but my son, who's 11, recently found it. So we're doing a watch through together, which is fun because I haven't seen it in so long. Although, weird things come up. Like my son also didn't know that anal fissures were a thing, that I had to explain to him.
11's a little young. I'm not going to lie. I mean,
it's a mix. It's a mixed bag.
It's certainly not unprecedented. I mean, I have people come up at like 7 or 8 years old, and I'm like, I don't know. My kids are 6 and 9. They have not watched it yet, to be clear, but that's also partly, I think, because it's kind of weird. Watch Dad, but yeah.
Sometimes you go back and you watch like a show from 10 years ago, and you're like, oh, that didn't age well. Just not only the jokes, but just the quality, and you're like, oh, I guess the show didn't stand the test of time the way I thought it would, but everything I've seen so far has held up pretty well.
Well, I think there's a reason for that. I mean, I did write a book and created a podcast sort of around answering this question. I do think there's a very, very specific reason of why it does. I mean, one, to your point, it's pretty smart, and the writing is pretty smart and funny. But two, it's a documentary, right? I mean, it's a mockumentary, but it's a documentary. And so what happens is that because it's shot in that way, it is literally a show about a very specific place in a very specific time in a very specific city, state, region. And so if you go back and you watch a documentary, say, about the 1960s, you don't look at that and say, oh, that's dated, right? No, because it was about that's what it was. So I think particularly early on, the lack of an iPhone or even smartphones in general. I mean, that we sort of birthed that, that sort of happened while we were on, and the show sort of morphed with that as that a whole sort of new era of tech was beginning and then thriving. So I do think that's why psychologically you don't have that it's dated, because I mean, you don't make fun of, or well, you might make fun of what people wore in the 60s, but you at the same time you don't go, oh, this is a dated documentary. You're like, oh no, well, this is about what it was. So our sort of timeless, this also helps, the sort of timeless department store, to be nice, basic work attire. It just sort of is what it is as well, right?
Yeah, and I have to say, when you say work attire, really quickly, I went to a concert a couple weeks ago, and I wanted some new clothes, and I went to Goodwill, and I accidentally bought a woman's shirt that was in the men's section, and I didn't realize it until I was in Baltimore at a show and went to button it, and I immediately had to come home and find the Michael Scott women's suit episode. And watching that the first time, I never thought I'd be the guy who bought women's clothes and wore them out and wouldn't notice. But one thing I really noticed, especially as I've watched it again, is how dramatic so much, especially as you get into the Jim, Pam, Roy, uncomfortably so. For all the humor in it and the cringeworthy Michael Scott jokes, watching that made me uncomfortable. Where maybe Jim and Pam are flirting and Roy comes up and catches them and is like, what's going on? I felt like getting anxiety and tension. So there was a lot of that. It showed a lot of depth to the show that wasn't just this comedy, but there were a lot of those moments where you could kind of feel that, and it almost made me feel a little uncomfortable, but in a good way, showing that it was such a well-crafted show.
I think the show sort of brought back at least and showed that it can thrive on network television is this whole notion of cringe comedy. So there is a part of that, and part of it is the inappropriate things that are being said largely by Michael, but also just the way that it makes you feel. And I think that there's a part of it is the way the show is shot, which is a little spy-y, it is. And the fact that, there was a decision had to be made in every scene, which added another layer to the show than essentially any other show, which is, as this interaction is playing out between these people, are they aware that the camera is there? Are they acknowledging that the camera is there? Or is the camera hiding and they are being filmed unknowingly? And sort of how that dynamic, just in and of itself, changes behavior, makes a moment different, right? Like you can particularly see it in the Michael Scott character. Like, is he performing for the camera? Is he getting caught by the camera, or is he unaware that the camera is filming him at all right now? And how that alters his performance gives a whole other layer than exists anywhere else, where you're watching a television show and you are just, it is just being filmed as this sort of like, I don't know, third person omniscient being that's just showing you the action. There's no conversation about how that filming changes behavior. It's not a part of that conversation. So, that was something that was different and unique, and the show was coming about as reality television was coming about, and those were some of the types of things, particularly in terms of behavior, that the higher ups, our bosses, Greg Daniels, our creator, among others, were sort of exploring through the show.
So well done. So well done. So I guess, why are we on a show called Chefs Without Restaurants, where I talk to people in the food and beverage business? Well, anyone, I guess, who's a fan of The Office, there was a chili episode. It wasn't even an episode. It was like 30 seconds. I mean, I think one of the things that people remember most about Kevin is his chili, where you made your pot of chili and then dumped a pot of chili on the floor, which has led to a book on chili recipes. And we'll get into a little later, a forthcoming book on barbecue. So I want to talk about that chili episode a little bit. How was that presented to you? Like, did you just get a script one day and they talk you through, like, you're going to make this giant pot of chili and you're going to spill it on the floor and then slop around in it?
Well, I mean, it wasn't really presented to me. I mean, we had, if things were running smoothly, I would say as we were shooting an episode, which was, one episode was 1 week, so Monday through Friday. And I would say on about a Tuesday or Wednesday of that week at lunch, we would read as a group the next week's episode. So that was it. I mean, we read it. And someone has told me, I had forgotten this, and this was, I'm sure very, very well researched people from the internet. It's where I heard it, and I still haven't gone back. That I guess some writer said that this was originally supposed to be the open of a different episode. So we had read it and then ended up not shooting it, and then it subsequently came up, and they sort of just took the entire thing and put it, because that was we called them cold opens on the show. Was the idea being that by and large, our episodes existed in one day, beginning to end. And the cold opens were an opportunity, largely for comedy, sometimes for other things, to sort of just take a moment in time, sort of, splice of life, if you will, moment that was sort of not connected to anything else, not even necessarily the time of year or what day it was sort of unknown, generally not connected to anything else. So that's what it was. I have been told the scene, the episode, if you will, there was a lot of discussion in the writer's room, the one writer in particular, and I have not discussed this with them, so I'm not going to mention their names, but apparently did not like it because, and if you look at it, it is true, it is sort of unlike anything else that happened in the show ever, in that it was essentially a scene that played out with voiceover, sort of an omniscient voiceover playing out over this continual action scene. I guess that writer got, maybe won a battle, but not the war, and they ended up doing it. And I just remember it being not even particularly like memorable in like, this is so incredible, but more just like, oh, here's a unique challenge with things like, this is going to spill all over the carpet. How are we going to manage that? Like,
did they tell you have like one? Was it like you've got to get this done in one shot kind of thing?
They had 3 gigantic pieces of carpet. Yeah.
Okay. I was wondering because if you spill chili on your carpet at home, it's going to be stained for life. Like, need a new carpet kind of thing.
Yes. And I mean, these are professional people who obviously really know their job. I mean, it was like, not just like, oh, let's just throw some carpet over the carpet that's there. No, I mean, it was like professionally like installed in a way, like quote unquote, so there wouldn't be any weird seams or like, bumps or anything like that. And so they had 3. And, because again, they didn't know exactly how big the mess was going to end up being. I mean, it was huge because they couldn't. If it had spoiled the carpet underneath, this would have been a like catastrophic issue for like the rest of the week. Although I think we did it on a Friday, but still like having to replace all of that was not possible. So
but for continuity, they should have left it forever, right? Like I'm sure there's people on the internet who are like, the next week the stain's gone. It should still be there.
But see, I made the point before you were able to make that point. See, these moments happen out of time and space. So, everything else, right? Very super realistic, if you will, in terms of the amount of time something would take or, the progression from morning till night and how someone looked and, all of that they were very, 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 our script supervisor and continuity were very careful. The cold opens were a little more like, well, I mean, like what? Dwight's desk gets, wrapped like, wrapping paper or whatever, when did that happen? Or gets moved into the bathroom. Like, when did that happen? How did it get back? These things were destroyed, whatever. But again, those moments were sort of allowed to be outside of it. So, that was sort of a unique challenge. And knowing what a big mess it was going to be and how difficult it was going to be to do multiple takes. I mean, us getting it in one take was, something I was tremendously proud of then, and more so now because so many people ask about it. We were able to get it in one take.
Are you done for the day at that point? Like, you're covered in it, and
done.
It's all over your suit, and you're like, we're done here.
Yeah, no, I mean, we were done. And that was like, like I said, that was like the end of the day on a Friday.
Go to Chili's, get a drink now.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we were going to be done. And, there was so much preparation, so many tests of, how this was going to spill and what it was going to do and where it was going to move and, all of that stuff. And, I had multiple outfits, doubles and triples and quadruple. I don't know how many outfits they had, but, to put me back to normal. But I mean, I've said it before and it really is, it sounds like a joke, but it's not. I don't think anyone could have imagined how to clean me well enough. Like, we had everything else, but we didn't have an extra one of me to like slide in, and just my hands were a different color. Like, it was just such a mess. And if we had to go back again, I mean, an hour it would have taken, an hour and a half, like just to get me back reasonable, to a reasonable beginning, pre-spill place, it would have been a big deal. So thankfully we did get it.
Well, you are an actor, a superb actor of our time. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you.
Do you think Kevin is someone who cooks? How much time do you put into thinking about like what this person is in the time that you don't see them on the show? So, like Kevin's chili. I'm trying to figure out like what kind of person is Kevin? Is he someone who cooks at home all the time? Does he do takeout? Like, what's your perception of Kevin and his relationship to food? Besides loving it.
Very interesting question there. I mean, yeah, I think that after his fiance, we find out his fiance Stacy left. I think probably pretty solitary and probably a lot of takeout and just totally fine with that. But yeah, I mean, he is tremendously proud. I mean, look, without getting too cheesy or sentimental, I think it's what the show is about, right? I mean, the very last line of the show tells you what it's about, which is there's beauty in ordinary things. Isn't that kind of the point? And I think that's what the show does, is it aims to celebrate, quote unquote, ordinary people and their small victories. So, I mean, I think, is the chili scene funny? Sure, I hope so. But I think more than that, it is a moment where it is sort of the physical embodiment of that idea, which is, the creator of the show tells us what it's all about, which is there's beauty in ordinary things. And this is a guy who you wouldn't expect would make unbelievable chili. But I think based on all of the information that we have and the detail with which Kevin describes making the chili, I believe it is very, very delicious. There's no indicators that it is terrible at all. It's a tragedy that he doesn't get to share it with his office workers on this particular day. But see, I think there were days, he tells us once a year, he likes to bring it in, that he brings it in and people enjoy it. And I think that is, that's what's important about the scene. And yeah, I think it's something he's proud of. So, is he making, pasta or whatever every night? I don't know about that, but I think there are a few things that he does well and he enjoys doing it.
Well, and it's interesting because I think of both like chili and barbecue as those kind of things too, just a reference point. Like my dad is someone who I would not say is a cook, but has maybe like one or two recipes in his arsenal. And guys, tend to sometimes gravitate towards like the grill and barbecue and smoking and stuff like this. I also wondered if, I've worked in enough kitchens where nobody's around, you scoop that stuff up and still serve it. And as as I was watching it, you're scooping it back into the pot with the manila fold or something, and like, oh, maybe if no one is around, it's just gonna go in the break room and serve that up.
No, I don't. Look again. If you go to when everybody showed up that day, that carpet was stained. Yeah, there is no disguising that for sure.
So you've managed to turn this 30-second clip into, a whole cookbook thing there. I need to get your PR people because, man. So you put out a cookbook about chili a couple years ago. I'd love to, I think there's a good transition into that book. Like how and why did that come about? Was it something you had thought about like as far back as when the show was on, or was it like when the show was over, you're like, yeah, you know what, maybe we can turn this chili thing into a cookbook?
This was more guided by the fans and then what became my experience. I mean, I do cook. I love to cook, but I had never made chili. I mean, that wasn't something that I grew up doing, or I had, or more specifically, because there were a lot of things that the writers sort of got from the actors. So I think in that way, it's a fair point. Like, was this something that the writers knew that you enjoyed doing or were good at? No, it was totally disassociated from me at all.
So this was not Brian's chili as
no,
Kevin's
this had
chili.
nothing. No, like Well, like an obvious example is, or two examples is like me making 13, 15-foot basketball shots, that was not faked. Like that was me. So that idea came about because of me. Do I like to gamble and play poker? Absolutely. Was that aspect of Kevin, maybe did that come from me? Absolutely. Chili? No, not at all. And so I don't even know why. I can't really go back and honestly tell you why, except maybe I just thought it would sound good. This was years after. And look, let's be honest. I mean, it happened years after, in part because the show just kept getting more and more and more and more popular. So it wasn't like, 5 years after the show or whatever, like, oh, let's go back and do this thing. No, it just had kept getting brought up. And I sort of spontaneously, with absolutely no agenda or anything, made chili. And then there wasn't even a plan, but then like I was finished making it and thought, oh yeah, like, oh, I made that chili that time. And that's kind of a big deal for people. Let me take a picture of it and post it on Instagram. And then people went nuts. And I was like, this is interesting. Like, okay, I didn't know. And, part of it was by then I could post there was a time there, right? Especially Instagram was like a food posting, like people would post what they made or whatever. Or I would be at a restaurant even or whatever. And the comments would just come like, well, why aren't you eating chili? Or where's the chili? Or don't spill the chili? Or, does that go good with chili? Or like whatever. It just sort of kept coming up. So I had the opportunity to go to like the World Championship Chili Cook-Off, to name one place where this was being made. And I had started to make it a little bit more, sort of play with like a recipe that I was sort of, quote unquote, perfecting or changing, like you do with chili and well, really barbecue too. And had an opportunity to meet the folks at this World Championship Chili Cook-Off. And this is not like something that somebody invented last year. Like it's been going almost 60 years, and got them to agree to include a bunch of recipes in a cookbook. And so that sort of came out of that sort of experience with the world of the world of chili, the sort of the culture of chili, and me learning way, way more about it. And, I tell people like before the book or anything, it was like, there's 177 chili recipes in that. Like I thought there were 3 recipes for chili. I thought there was, maybe 4. Like there was mild, medium, and hot, and with or without beans, so however many combinations that is, like that's sort of what I thought, like how much can you really do with this? But then learning it, and there's chicken, and there's white bean, and there's brisket, and there's ground beef and turkey.
What do you think of Cincinnati
vegan
chili? Do you get down with that? Have you ever had like Skyline chili? Like
I'm not going to mention any. I'm not going to mention any brands specifically,
sure.
But I am familiar with Cincinnati chili, and in fact, my father, and his, my grandparents grew up in the Cincinnati area.
Oh.
And so I have had the opportunity to have Cincinnati chili a lot. It is not my thing. The chili over noodles, I don't need that. So it's not really my thing, but hey, to each their own as far as I'm concerned. I don't need to judge it. It's just not my thing. Like for me, chili has beans in it. And I spent some time in Texas. I don't want to make anybody mad. Actually, I was in Texas last week and I said something about it. And these were Texans. This wasn't like, like transplant. And they were like, oh, that's like a whole archaic thing. We don't, because I've always been told like, oh no, they'll fight you on this.
Oh yeah, that's what I've heard too.
Yeah, like no, they will fight.
And why is that such a big deal? Beans.
These people were like, oh no, who cares? No, like we eat it with beans or without beans, or like. And I was like, oh okay, well there you go. I learned something new. I probably had a big deal in my cookbook about how it's fighting words because that's what I've always been told by people. But maybe that's more outsider. I don't know. I don't want to get into this debate. For me, it's beans, but also there are amazing recipes that don't utilize the bean. So
what about cinnamon? You have any chili recipes that have cinnamon in them? Because that's
there are some in there with cinnamon. But here's the thing that I learned from, and I'm not saying cinnamon is bad, but particularly in this competition world, cinnamon and brown sugar, they are, and it's so crazy because now I've judged some stuff and you can almost immediately taste it. And it is used. It's like, I don't know what I know this is a cooking program and not this, but like sort of like whatever the thing is that hides performance enhancing drugs, PEDs. It's like that's how people view cinnamon and like brown sugar a little bit. Not that some sweetness or some cinnamon flavor is bad, but if you can really taste it and you can identify it, it is viewed as like, oh, they're hiding some badness in there, and they're trying to like butter you up with like some sweetness so that, and it ends up, just spoiler alert, having the opposite effect. Because even if you kind of enjoy it as a judge or whatever, you're like, yeah, but they're like, I don't know. It is a distinct flavor, believe it or not. And let me just say this too, because I haven't talked too much about this. I think you'll enjoy the process of judging one of these things is, and look, I'm no expert. You're not gonna. It's not like the crazy, insanely talented sommeliers, right? Who can sip a wine and say like, that's the 1985 French delicacy, blah, blah, blah. So it's not like that for me. It's like, oh yes, well, it has hints of cumin and blackberry elder. And I don't have that. But so I felt very intimidated the first time I did it. So what it is they have 20, and that's not a joke, like 22 bowls of unmarked chili around a giant table. And you approach the table at a certain point, and there are multiple judges that are judging this group. And if it's the finals, obviously you're deciding, 1, 2, and 3 or whatever. But if not, you're literally passing on, say, 3 chilies from this table to the next group. And you start at a certain place and you walk around the table, and then you can continue to walk around the table as many times as you want. If you're like, well, I really liked 21 and also 8. Let me taste 8. And then you walk over to 21. You can taste that again. And they at least at the World Championships, they give you tortillas, like little triangles of tortillas and sour cream, which you are supposed to eat one in between each one, so it like cleanses your palate, and plenty of water, and then you can walk around and do that. So I was like through, say, 9 of the first time I did it, of the like 22, I was through like 9, and I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Why am I here? Like, no, because you're not eating that much, right? No, but I'm just like, why am I here? I don't know what I'm doing. And you start feeling like, oh no, like how can I evaluate this and that? And you get sort of like, I got sort of like in my head for a brief period of time. Anyway, point being, I finished and went around and was like, okay, well, these are, my top 3 and blah, blah, blah. So then we leave, we submit the results. So there was no tampering, there's no cheating, and leave. And there are a couple of people who were judging my table that I knew. And so I'm like, oh, I think I said before, I was like, write down what your numbers are. Just write them so that we can talk about it. And as we're leaving, I'm like, all right, so what were your top 3? And I'm telling you, with like 3 or 4 different people, 22 chilies all around the table, they were the same. Like there's something about it. Like when it's good, for whatever reason, like you can feel that it's good and that it's different. I mean, that's the only way I can explain
Can
it.
you do you know what that is? Like now in hindsight, like that it was a spice or something or the texture? Like, did you ever figure out what it was about those particular ones that did it for you?
Well, so the one that sort of the main one is they call it home style, which basically does mean with beans. And that's it. So it is chili with beans, but it could be like my favorite one. So my top one ended up being number 2, but like I think it was my number 2 ended up winning, and so it was it was all very close. This was this first year. My number 1, which honestly, like me walking in the room, I'm like, is this chili? Is this a soup? Like, what is this? Was this smoked chicken white bean, like a white chili? So it's competing against like what you would think of as like the red, more sort of traditional ground beef or whatever.
Yeah.
But there could be a vegetarian one like within this as well, or like turkey, or I always, when I'm judging, I always write down to help remind me. I just write cubed, but like cubed steak, or more like briskety or something. So yeah, so that's also like making the cookbook. I was like, wow, like my mind is like blown by all of the different kinds. And yeah, so in terms of like, is there a unifying thing? No, because they are all so different. But for me, a lot of it is, I definitely have not talked about this, but I don't know if this makes sense to you. When you try something, right? And it there's any, let's call it a complex dish that is eaten together, right? So I'm not talking about a piece of chicken or whatever. And it tastes harmonious and together. Everything is working together, as opposed to this sort of layered, like, oh, I can taste hot sauce with bean, but somehow the flavor isn't fully in the meat. Also, like the meat is sort of seems separate, and all of that. That's a big part of it for me. That's a big, and I'll give you my one other than don't overcook the onions, which is true. The other one is, I like, if you want spice, and it's for that reason that I just talked about alone. If you want spice, cayenne pepper, and you don't have to use a lot of it, actually helps bring things together. Whereas I feel like a lot of people put in hot sauce, and that doesn't congeal is the wrong word, but it doesn't
there's
mix.
like acidity and other stuff going on. Like, because hot sauces have, varying levels of things, but like quite often there's vinegar in there and other things. And it's not just like the pure raw heat.
Correct. Yeah. And so that's a tip of mine. Like I don't use hot sauce at all in chili because of that. Because I feel like you can taste that separately as opposed to having it be a part of the thing.
Yeah. It's like music, right? Like good music is, 5 or however many, 10 instruments and things coming together harmoniously. But sometimes you hear something where it's like, wow, are these guys even on the same page? Like, I don't want to hear the guitar and the drum like separately. It should blend a little together. And I think any, creative thing, I see a lot of parallels with that in my mind.
Yeah.
So we've got chili. And now I guess we should probably talk about, you have another book coming out that's a cookbook in, I guess, a little over a month now, or maybe a little under a month, about barbecue. So were you a barbecue guy? Are you someone who like grills and smokes at home and stuff like that? Like,
yeah.
The decision to do a barbecue book, did that seem pretty natural for you? Like once you did the chili cookbook?
Yeah, that's me. I mean, that is what I do. I mean, I love doing it. I mean, the similarities with chili, I think, are which I think is why I do enjoy chili and the culture of chili is this sort of communal nature. I mean, I would joke when I was talking about the chili cookbook, like very few people make a pot of chili for themselves. Like
that would be pretty weird if they
yeah,
did, but.
like you're making it because you're having a gathering.
Yeah.
There's a sports event or a big dinner that you're having with friends and family. And oftentimes, and I think this is more so true with barbecue and grilling, you're people are doing it together. I mean, this, no joke. Last night, I had a friend over and I was trying to do, I wasn't cooking something different, but I was using a different technique to try to cook some tri-tip with, by the way, varying results. Like, I'll be honest, like, oh, okay, that cooked way faster than I thought it was going to. Okay. But I mean, this was, tri-tip is not really a slow cooked meat, but still like getting the wood, because we used fire, getting the wood sort of just right, and how long that was going to take, and getting the temperature and all. I mean, we were outside. Even for something that was not supposed to be slow cooked, it was an hour and a half or more, 2 hours that we were fiddling around with it. And, maybe had an adult beverage or two and had a great time doing it. And, the meat didn't turn out exactly as well, but I also made chicken as well. The chicken was like, which we thought was a disaster, was actually totally delicious and good. And, the tri-tip, we like, okay, well, next time we'll do this differently. And you know what? We probably will. Like, he'll come over again and we'll do it again and it will be way, way better. But that sort of communal experience, I enjoy that. And more than anything, I enjoy just doing, I'm not a big, how do I say this? Sitting around and chatting is great. That's great. But if you can hang out and chat and also have an activity that you're doing with that thing, for me, even better. Like even better. And I think it is very connecting and makes people closer together by doing that thing. So I really enjoy it.
Well, and especially if you're doing something that's a little longer, like cooking meat, where it makes it feel like less like a chore. Two things I've gotten into a lot is I like to do tacos and make my own tortillas, but also pizza. I recently got an uni oven, and that is as fun as that is. And I don't know if you've done pizza. It's a task when you're trying to feed more people. So I have a family of 6 at my house. So like that's a 1 hour process, because every pizza you pitch in, and they're not huge. It's like, okay, it's in there for 7 minutes and it's done. Here's one person's pizza. Now I'm going back outside to do another. And an hour later, everyone's eaten but me. So that's more of those things that's more suited. Like, we're all outside around the oven and we can just fire it up and share it, as opposed to like, weeknight dinner, let's get food on the table. That's not really what I want to be doing.
I got into doing the pizza thing, and again, maybe it's not grilling or barbecue. Maybe it's just fire. Maybe that's what it is for me. Like that, I like fire. I don't know. During the pandemic, I had it was a house that I was living in at the time that had a built-in, not built-in, but like a solid structure, actual stone outdoor wood pizza oven.
Oh wow, that's neat. I want one
and
of those.
I had lived in the house, I don't know, call it 3 years, never done it. Never even thought about doing it. And then it's a funny thing what a global pandemic does. It's like, what can we do now at home that takes time? So I started doing that, and I got very into that. I mean, you talk about making the homemade tortillas, making the dough, and I've got to make this dough 3 days ahead and, do all these
You really have to plan for that. My dough is pretty much a 72-hour dough. So it's like, it's not a tomorrow night thing.
Yeah. But I really, no, I enjoy that a lot.
Barbecue sauce. Do you have a preferred? I'm not going to talk about best, but like if you had a sauce, do you have a style that you tend to prefer given your choices of all of them, say?
Not so much. I mean, I feel like, so I'm from Georgia, which I do think is barbecue and specifically what you're talking about, that barbecue sauce is a very big part of the culture, but I don't view it, at least myself, and I don't want to make any of my old compadres feel bad. I don't feel like there's a defining thing with Georgia barbecue. Like Carolina is very sort of specific, and Kansas City as well, Texas. So you have these Memphis. You have these regions where there is sort of a very specific style or flavor, and so I don't feel like that's true in Georgia, or at least where I grew up and what I was doing. I feel like it was just like, sauce. Like, okay, all right, right, yeah, sauce. Okay. So in terms of what I use now, I'm gonna answer your question by not answering your question at first, because I think that something I talk about quite a bit in the book, which is different from how I grew up, where it was just make it and then slather sauce on it, is for me really having the meat be the star. And so buying high quality, well sourced meats, the difference in flavor as well is just huge. I mean, it really is. And so I've been exploring much more recently with using rubs, less about the sauce than anything else. We made this one last night, which is it's not really. Are you familiar with? We didn't make this. Sorry, I did a rub, and then we used this. It's called the brand. I think it's the brand. It's called Japanese barbecue.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like there is one that I feel like is called Japanese barbecue that has like a white label on it. Like,
yes.
Like they have it at Costco now, I think, like a giant bottle. I've never used it as like a cooking sauce. Like my son loves to have it on the table, and it's just like, we'll put it on things, but I've never done it as like a saucing and cooking kind of technique.
I did that last night. It's interesting because it's not, and again, this doesn't really answer your question, but it's what I'm thinking about today, because I'm like, it's way more in the like teriyaki. It's like the weirdest combination of teriyaki and barbecue sauce.
Yeah, it definitely has like a soy component if we're thinking about the same one. And
yes,
it's
exactly.
It's not thin like a vinegar barbecue sauce, but it's definitely not thick like a ketchup-based barbecue sauce. It's somewhere in the middle, almost like they did like a cornstarch slurry kind of like thickening job on it. Or there's probably some emulsifier in there.
Yeah, you're right. I thought it was quite good, by the way. So that's, but usually I would say that I tend to, especially if I'm just like buying a rub, I would say that I tend to move in the Kansas City that sort of flavor profile, which is a little sweet and also some smoky stuff sort of built into it as well. That's probably the one that, if I'm looking for something new to use, I'll do that. But I am definitely utilizing more the rub, where I feel like, when I was observing more as a kid, I feel like I don't know, there was a lot of rubbing happening.
No,
I mean, pun intended.
Never in my house.
It was just sauce. It was a lot of sauce.
Yeah. Us too. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, and if we did ribs at home from scratch, it was maybe salt and pepper, and they went on the grill. We didn't have a smoker, and you got the very thick Casey Masterpiece or whatever the brand was back then. We probably bought the store brand. That's just, ketchup, high fructose corn syrup, and a little vinegar and some spice in there. Just put a shit ton on there, and that was ribs. Yeah. I grew up in Massachusetts, so like nowhere with a history or culture of barbecue. Yeah.
Okay.
What about sides? Do you have favorite sides? Like if you had, you go to a barbecue place and you got the meat and 3, what are the 3?
Oh, like if I'm ordering something?
Yeah. Let's make
Oh,
it because I don't want you to
jeez.
take like an easy way out. You're going to a place like we're doing takeout barbecue tonight. We have a place in town that does Tuesday night specials, and we get to pick 3 sides. So like if you were doing, let's say, going to a barbecue place and they had all the classics.
The 3 that just jumped into my mind, if I was getting 3, would be, well, okay. I'll give you 4 because it kind of depends on
Okay,
how
that's
they
fine.
are. But the 3 I would say mac and cheese, coleslaw, and baked beans.
Those are good ones. Those would probably be mine.
Yeah. Now, if I would probably be scared to order it unless I knew that it was good and what I wanted. I live in California now, and I do appreciate and love this, that we don't cook the hell out of vegetables here. We actually taste what they taste like and so forth. However, if I'm in the South and there was something that I knew was going to be good.
Green beans.
Yeah, green beans.
The kilt green beans, right? That you cook with bacon and onions, and they're like almost gray.
Yeah, destroyed.
That's a classic.
Yes.
That is. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't traditionally eat green beans that way, but if I'm going for something like that, I
That's
like
right.
a nice crispy green bean. But if you're doing the Southern, we've just had them on a pot all day in a
Just
broth with like a
ham.
ham bone or something.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, I'm with
Yeah.
you. Are you planning on doing any like cooking promo type stuff? I know you've done like Binging with Babish and Nick DiGiovanni and Today Show and all kinds of cooking things. With a new book coming out, are you planning on doing any social media cooking videos or anything like that?
I think it's in the works right now. In the next few weeks, yeah, you may see me on some of those guys again. What's funny is when I had the experience before, I enjoyed the hell out of all of those guys and gals. I mean, you mentioned 3 right there. Also, Joe Volpus. I really enjoyed them a lot, and particularly Binging with Babish. He ended up writing the foreword for this cookbook based
Very cool.
exclusively on his first foreword. By the way, breaking news here on the show. His first forward, just because of my relationship I had with him through that.
And I love, this time with social media and videos and stuff. People like my son, they're more inclined to watch those guys on a YouTube video than me as a professional chef, gravitate towards. So if my son's, watching YouTube shorts or shorter cooking videos, I think it's really cool. And those are some of the people. I mean, Nick was a guest on my podcast, and my son just thought that was the coolest. First of all, he's like, oh, now you're like 2 degrees away from Mr. Beast, because like he does videos with Nick. So like, how cool is my dad, right? So, little street cred.
Yeah.
I have one thing I really want to make sure that I ask, and you might not even be able to answer or talk about, but we have a new office coming, because that was just really announced like last week or so. Do you have any info, insights, or just optimism about the new show that's going to be hitting us soon?
There's not much that I can say about it. I think there's a lot of aspects that they're still figuring out, but knowing that Greg Daniels is involved and Michael Coleman, who's co-creating it with him, who's a great, very smart guy as well as the husband of Ellie Kemper. It's going to be great. So I have all the confidence that they're gonna nail it. I just don't specifically know much more about it than you do.
Well, they say it's in the Dunder Mifflin world, so maybe in some universe somewhere we'll see. I don't know, maybe Scrantonicity's out there playing somewhere, and Kevin's doing well with that.
Maybe.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time today, and I'm gonna push this out there, and hopefully people will pick up the new book when it comes out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate it.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day, and hope to see you around some other time.
Yeah, you too.
You're still here? The podcast's over. If you are indeed still here, thanks for taking the time to listen to the show. I'd love to direct you to one place, and that's chefswithoutrestaurants.org. From there, you'll be able to join our email newsletter, get connected in our free Facebook group, and join our personal chef, catering, and food truck database so I can help get you more job leads. And you'll also find a link to our sponsor page where you'll find products and services I love. You pay nothing additional to use these links, but I may get a small commission, which helps keep the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast and organization running. You might even get a discount for using some of these links. As always, you can reach out to me on Instagram at Chefs Without Restaurants or send me an email at chefswithoutrestaurants@gmail.com. Thanks so much.